On today's episode of Wengel's Workshop, I'm going to be forging a 7-inch Bowie knife. Now, what inspired me to forge this Bowie knife was all of the beautiful blades that were made by the new journeyman smiths at the Atlanta Blade Show this June. If you haven't seen them, you could follow a photographer on Instagram. His page is Sharp by Coop, and he uploaded photos of all of the new Journeyman Smith blade sets, and they are just some really beautiful knives. So I think that inspired me to want to forge out a knife that's in similar fashion to the ones that they have to make for the Journeyman Smith test, and maybe even potentially sign up for the ABS and try to, eventually get my Journeyman Smith license as well. No rush to do that, but this is basically the inspiration of why I'm making this knife. So I'll be making this knife from 1084 high carbon steel. The stock is 0.14 of an inch thick. It's definitely thinner than I think I or most people would like to use, but I do think using that thinner steel can help increase your skill because you have to deal with the fact that it folds on itself until you thicken it up. So it kind of increases your hammer skills. And so far, I smashed out the plunge area, and then I started to forge in the hidden tang. And now I'm working on the tip of the knife. I just hammered it down at an angle, and now I'm smashing it out a bit flatter. And so I'm just going to continue working that out. And then after that is done, I will start forging in the bevels. Okay, so here you can see that I'm forging in the bevels, and that's going to bring that tip back up because as it stretches the steel out, that tip kind of forges out and straightens out the spine of the blade. And then just to help forge in that clip point, I'm going to go back to the top and hammer it in just a bit to make sure that the clip point looks nice. And then I will flatten the stock back out. Now I cut the knife from the stock material and I will forge the tang out. I'm going to need to lengthen it up and thin it out a bit. At this point I was undecided whether I wanted to do a full through tang or just a regular tang. I eventually decided to just do a regular tang, but at this point in time I wanted to make sure it was long enough so I had the option to do either. And so here I'm pretty much done forging it to shape. I'm just refining it out and making sure it's flat. I will clamp it in a vise with angle iron inside of it to make sure that it's as straight as possible. And then I'll do a couple normalization cycles before getting started on the stock removal aspect. So now I'm going to go ahead and finish profiling the knife on the grinder. It's a relatively small amount of work, which I'm pretty happy about because I feel like I forged it pretty close to the shape that I was looking for. After that, I will put it on a magnet and surface grind it, and then we'll just kind of keep moving from there. So now I need to square up the shoulders for the tang, so I will mark a line that's perpendicular to the spine at a perfect 90 degree, and then I will throw a filing jig on and use files to square up those shoulders and thin out the tang area to make a step where the guard will sit. Now I use some layout fluid to coat the primary bevel edge and the false bevel edge. And this way I can use a drill bit to mark out my bevel lines, or basically I'm making center lines to mark out where the apex of the bevels are going to be ground to. So now I'll jump over on the grinder and I will grind in the false bevels on the clip point. It can be difficult to do this on a platen, especially when it's a clip point, but it just takes a little practice, and I always have to come back with a file and draw file it to flatten them out and make them look good. So once they're rough ground in, I'll come back with a digital caliper and mark out the line so that I can make sure that they're even on both sides with a file. Now I'm going to head back over to the grinder to roughen the preheat treatment bevels. For this grinding, I use a style of, it's like freehand-ish but with a work rest. And it's exceptionally easy when you have a straight spine like I do on this one. I can just basically set that straight spine down and drag it right across the platen. By now, I decided that I was not going to do a through tang knife, so I decided to go ahead and cut off that extra like inch and a half of tang that I didn't need. So this guy's almost ready to be heat treated, although I'm going to go ahead and fit up the guard right now and the handle material, and that way I can drill a hole in the tang prior to doing the heat treatment. You could actually heat treat the knife first and then come back and soften the tang with a torch, but I'd rather not have to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it in this order. So now I'll go ahead and drill as many holes as I can where I need the slot and the guard. And then I don't have a mill, so to connect the holes, basically I clamp the guard vertically, and then I use the drill bit and kind of just create a downward pressure or an upward pressure until the holes connect. Once that's done, I will repeatedly try to hammer the guard into place and then use hand files to slowly remove material until it sits right. In this instance, the slot ended up too wide, so what I did was I put it in the forge and then slid it over the tang and hammered it so that the slot would close up. And then after that, I took it back off the knife and I had to regrind it flat. It did work to an extent, but it's not perfect, so I still may end up redoing the guard. The other concern is this pit in the spine of the knife, but I'm doing a full flat grind, so I think I'll be able to grind that pit out. So here I am grinding away a little of the guard material to help it sit a little more flush. And again, I might just end up redoing this full guard, but we'll see. This is the block of handle material I'll be using. It's like dyed and stabilized burl, and it comes from a guy named Oleg at knifewood.com. It's the best material I've ever used. And then I'll also be using a couple of black G10 spacers and some green micarta. That'll go between the guard and the handle material. Once the materials are cut out, I'll go ahead and slot them and fit them up to the guard. You can actually use a bit that's slightly thicker than the tang in this instance because these don't have to fit as perfectly as the guard does. Now I'm going to mark out where the tang will line up in the handle material, and then I'll use that to determine where I should drill the holes to slot the handle material and where I need to also drill the hole for the pinhole. Now I'll clamp everything together, and then I will drill through the handle material and touch the tang. Once I know that I've created a little mark in the tang, I will actually remove it from the handle material and drill the hole in the tang separately, and then finish drilling through the handle material separately as well. So this is where we're going to go ahead and finish part 1 of the Bowie build videos. In part 2, I'm going to be finishing the knife all the way, and that'll be starting off with the heat treatment. I forgot to get a clip of the knife where it stands, so you're going to get a little sneak peek into next episode where the knife is post-heat treatment. And as you can see, I attempted to do a hamon. I have no idea how it turned out yet, so you'll have to tune in next time to see how that came out. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to be notified when I upload new videos, hit that notification bell. And I would also appreciate it if you jumped over and followed me on Instagram. And as always, thanks for watching.